Hello and welcome to our speaker series on this bright and beautiful day of Black History Month. Our topic for today is Representation Matters, and the topic has never been more timely. A 2016 report from the U.S. Department of Education predicts that by 2024, students of color, including Black, Latinx, Asian, and American Indian students, will make up 54% of the student body in public schools nationally. Yet 82% of educators in elementary and secondary schools are white, and only 20% of educational leaders are people of color. In New Jersey, we reached this milestone several years ago, and as of 2016, the majority of students in New Jersey schools are students of color. So why is representation here a problem? Well, Valerie Strauss writes about this very issue. In 2017, in a 2017 study published by the Institute of Labor Economics, researchers found that low-income Black elementary school students who were paired with a Black teacher in the 3rd, 4th, or 5th grades were 39% less likely to drop out of high school. The researchers also found that matching low-income Black students of both sexes with at least one Black teacher between the 3rd and 5th grade increased their aspirations to attend a 4-year college by 19%. But the benefits are not just for students of color. Don't think that the benefits only go that far. Having a teacher of color is beneficial to students of all races. Because of the lived experience that comes with being a person of color, minority teachers are able to identify and deconstruct the racial and cultural biases present in school systems, making it much more likely that classroom discussions include a social justice orientation. Reducing the number of Black teachers also robs white students of the opportunity to form critical relationships that could disrupt how racism is passed on to the next generation. Representation matters, and we are very proud to have this conversation with you today. The Center for Future Educators at TCNJ is an organization that works to recruit future educators from middle and high schools around the state of New Jersey through our conferences, NJEA chapters, Tomorrow's Teachers courses, and our summer academy. I am your host, Dr. Jean Del Coley, the Executive Director of the CFE, and this is our speaker series where we have monthly conversations with exemplary speakers about all things education. The purpose of our speaker series is to provide future educators in New Jersey the opportunity to see the many facets of education and the profession, and we hope to provide some inspiration. All of our speaker series events are recorded and available to view on our website. We will have the Q&A box available for later in the program, and this is a reminder that this program is being recorded and will be available on our CFE website at futureeducators.tcnj.edu sometime next week. It takes collaboration to make the CFE and its programming possible, and the center is graciously funded by the NJEA, and we are grateful that their support means that we can bring programming like this to you. Today's guest is Eric Jones, a field representative for organizational development with the New Jersey Education Association and former elementary school teacher in the Plainfield School District. While in Plainfield, Mr. Jones served as the district's public information officer and was president of the Plainfield Education Association. Mr. Jones is also the founder of the Members of Color Network with NJEA, which is growing by leaps and bounds and doing great work across the state. I can't wait to see what we learn today. Last but not least, we have our marvelous moderator, Kimberly Dixteen Hughes, the queen of queries and purveyor of prose, who also happens to be the 2020 New Jersey State Teacher of the Year and an English language arts teacher at Haddonfield Memorial High School. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to a program that's going to be a little bit different today. So Eric is we're just going to talk, right? And see how it goes from there. So Eric, I'm going to turn it over to you for now to give us a basic introduction about you and your journey and how you got to be here today.
Thank you so much. It's an awesome pleasure to be here this afternoon. Representation matters is a huge topic. So honored to be able to share. I'd like to start, if I may, by sharing a picture. If I may do that, I'd like for everyone to take a look at this photo here. So this was me in the spring of 1998. I was a senior who needed a haircut, by the way, but I was a senior in college, attending the Trenton State College. It just turned into the College of New Jersey. I was a few months away from graduation, and these are my students, along with Ms. Girandola, my cooperating teacher at the time. This was just a few of them. We were getting ready to go to lunch. But I wanted to share that to start Because if you noticed, I was the only person of color in that photo. I was the only person of color on my grade level. I was the only person of color in the building. And while I enjoyed being there at Orchard Hill, I also felt a sense of loneliness because I was indeed the only one in my world, in my reality. But I've always known that I wanted to go in education. I knew from the time I was in third grade, and I had Ms. Nussbaum as a teacher. She was amazing. Mr. Roundtree was our elementary principal. He was a Black man, and I wanted to be like him. And sadly, he died in 1985. Actually, I was in third grade, and I never forgot the feeling of loss, of not seeing him walk the halls anymore, wave and shake his hand at us. And it just never felt the same anymore. And so I wanted to provide that same opportunity for students. And so I went in education. There was never a doubt in my mind what my major was going to be. I loved every moment of school. I loved student teaching. And I loved the beginning part of my career and the career that I have now. I've been blessed to have worked in both New Jersey and Georgia. I actually was teaching in Atlanta. Second grade had just walked into gym on the day of 9/11. When my principal walks in, who knew I was from New Jersey, and said, "You need to turn on the TV." And I said, "I don't have time," because my lesson plans weren't done. And it's Tuesday, by the way, but that's a whole nother story. And so I was trying to hurry up and get him in. And he said, "Forget about your plans, turn on the TV." And of course, the rest is history of what I saw. But I've been fortunate to always have an amazing opportunity to reconnect with kids. I've taught second grade, third grade, fourth grade, and fifth grade. My favorite by far is fourth grade. I remember the Ilian Gonzalez situation years ago with the boy who was in Cuba trying to get to the country, and there was a big discussion all over the news. And that year I had 29 fifth graders, I'll never forget it, and half of my students were Hispanic. And I decided to scrap the lesson, and we're gonna have a conversation on what's happening. Should this boy be allowed to come into the country or not? And I drew a big tape and put it right across the room. If you believe he belongs back in Cuba, you stand on this side of the room. If you believe he has the right to come to the country, you come on this side of the room. And my principal walks in and she's like, "What is happening in this room?" And I said, "Come be a part of the discussion." And she said, "How did you get the kids to talk and to share?" And it was language arts, it was argument, it was debating, it was all of these things, and it was real-time instruction. And I always felt like as an educator, particularly a male, where there are a few of us, particularly as a Black male, which are even fewer, to make education and the experience of Mr. Jones's class different from anybody else you'll ever have, because I may be the only Black male teacher you ever have. And so for me, representation matters in my career because I was aware how unicornish, if that's a word, I may have been to my students, and to take every opportunity to connect and engage with them, not just instructionally, but also culturally. I remember my second year, I was in a district called Westfield, in Union County. I was one of 5 teachers of color in the whole district back in 1999. And I wanted to do a project for holiday season, December, on Hanukkah, Christmas, and Kwanzaa. Those were the 3 major holidays. And the kids randomly got chosen the holiday, and I got so much pushback from parents who, "Why does my child have to research Christmas? We don't celebrate Christmas in my family. And why are we researching Kwanzaa? Is it because you're Black?" Like, I got so much grief. And I finally said, that's part of the curriculum of the state is exposure, right? I'm not asking you to convert, but I'm certainly asking you to open your eyes and say, "Hey, my child just learned something they didn't know before." And it's interesting because those students, of course, now are grown, and they still hit me up on Facebook and other social media. "Mr. Jones, remember that project we did? Remember my mom hated it when we did it? I loved it." Like, I get all of that feedback now, and I kind of smile. But it's been an amazing career, and I'm so excited. About 3 years ago, I took a job at the NJEA as a field representative, and never did I think I'd ever work for a union. No one goes to college to work for a union, right? You go to a college to be an educator. But I felt it was a time to provide a connection to union members and to be a voice. And so I've been there almost 3 years and have loved every minute of it. We created something called Members of Color, which I could talk about a little later. But it's been awesome to share this journey, and so excited to be here to talk with everyone. So that's my story in a nutshell. I don't know if you want me to go any deeper into it, but I can, but I'm gonna leave time for questions, so.
Well, Eric, I can unpack the nutshell, I suppose. And then if anyone has questions, they'll drop those questions in the Q&A. So we'll try to answer them live if they have them. But we actually have a student group who puts together the questions for us. And I'm going to facilitate that as we go through. Yeah, so it's always a fun journey. And all the check marks are making sure I get all of our students' questions answered. So you told us a little bit, Eric, about your path into education and what that looked like. Why did you choose elementary school?
So I remember hearing a study in college that by fourth grade, age 9 and 10, boys of color understand and have determined then their path in life. Are you going to focus and be a studious student and give education your all? Or are you going to be behind? And behind often means you may end up dropping out, right? And so for me, I wanted to be at the most tender fundamental age, right? To make sure learning was fun. If you're behind, how can I get you caught up? I refuse to want any of my students to leave elementary school and you're reading at a 2-year deficit, because no one in middle school and high school is going to teach you phonics. Nobody has time for that. So if you don't have the fundamentals in elementary school, you're already behind. And so for me, my passion was always that fundamental age.
I think that's really powerful for everyone listening in terms of like how research informed your decision. And I think that as educators, I don't think the world understands how much research and scholarship impacts our decisions and what we do in the classroom. And I think that's very powerful, Eric. The first set of questions I should have said are all about your career as a classroom teacher. And then the second set are about your new positions. So I know we're backtracking. So one of the questions was about educators who impacted you both positively and negatively. And what about those educators? I know you talked about your principal, I think Mr. Longtree. Mr.
Roundtree, yes, Mr. Roundtree.
Yeah. Mr. Roundtree. And, you know, what were those positive experiences like, those behaviors? I know you started talking about that. And then did you have negative experiences that then fueled your passion?
So my elementary school was in Plainfield, where I ended up spending 19 years of my career, right? So it's full circle to be an elementary student and then full circle come right back. Actually, going to know something funny, when I became local president of my union, I had to file a grievance against my former elementary school principal. That was a moment. And she said, well, I never thought I would live to see this day. And I was like, it's me again. It's me. You used to suspend me. And now you're having to talk about a grievance. So for me, my elementary school experience was almost a fantasy world. I was in the winter concerts. I was in the band. We used to have the circus. We did all kinds of things. And it was an amazing experience until Mr. Roundtree passed. And I watched the same school that I loved become a school that I couldn't wait to get away from. It didn't feel the same anymore, right? And although some of the same teachers were there, some of them started leaving, right? They only came to that school because Mr. Roundtree was there. And I watched the culture change drastically. And that taught me as a student, wow, individuals actually make learning fun, right? It's not always the content, it's the personalities, it's the delivery. And I always wanted to be like Mr. Roundtree. I had teachers, some of them who saw me, and I don't mean saw me literally, I mean figuratively, right? They embraced my diversity. They embraced that Eric was a little smarter maybe than some of the other kids. So we're going to give him some extra work to do. Because I had other teachers who would tell me, just go sit in the class, or go turn around. And it was that disciplinarian mindset instead of challenging me. And so at Cedar Brook, I had great moments, and I had moments that I wish I could forget. But I attributed a lot to the leadership of the building and the teachers who really wanted the best for students, and others who, I remember my fifth grade teacher, I won't mention her name, but I said to her, like, why don't you just retire? Clearly you don't like me. You don't like anybody in this classroom. Like, why are you still here?
Wait, you said that as a student? You said that as a student? You said that as a student? Oh, wow, Eric. Okay.
Because how she treated the girls, and I knew this as a 10-year-old, how she treated the girls and how she treated the boys of color. And she wasn't a teacher of color, I should add. She was I felt like she was a racist. And I can't prove that at 10 years old, but it was obvious. The boys turn around and face the wall. Like, it was very nasty how she spoke to us. And I'm thinking, you don't like us. And I felt that, right? And so for me, funny enough, Kimberly, even as a teacher, I would tell some of my colleagues, this isn't the career you want to retire from. You don't like kids. Just how you talk to them in the hall. Let's find you, maybe Delta's hiring, right? Like, let's find you a career that you really want to be in, because this ain't it, right? And I've always believed to move kid-centric, right? If I was a kid, would I want to be in this room? If I'm a kid, would I want to do this assignment? And if the answer is no, then I don't know that I want to give it to my kids, right? Because I always want my classroom to reflect my kids and not necessarily the adults.
And that's, you must know the questions I'm going toward. This, the students want to know, to be kid-centric, like all those observations you made early in your career and actually over the span of your time in the classroom, what were some of your like go-to tips and tricks or choices to make sure that you were kid-centric or being the teacher that you needed, right, when you were in elementary school?
So I used to have journal time every Friday. And I would ask the kids to write for 10, 15 minutes. And part of it was me assessing grammar and stuff of that sort. But I wanted them to share, what did this week feel like to you in class? What was a highlight? What was a low light? What's something you want me to know? And you don't have to talk about it. It's always going to be in your journal. I'll respond back to your journal in writing, and we only talk about it on Fridays. And the stuff that the kids would share in their journal, I'm being bullied. This is happening. I really don't get this lesson. And the comfortability that they had, that they shared in that journal, told me everything I needed to know about me as a teacher, right? What am I doing well? Mr. Jones, you give too much homework. My mom says you don't give enough. Like, they literally put things in that journal that helped me become better. And I feel like in sales, you don't have a job unless your clients buy your product, right? So you're constantly evolving what you offer to make money. But in education, we often move in a way of entitlement where I taught it. Hope you learned it, but I taught the lesson. Well, no. If our students didn't learn it, we didn't teach it, right? And we have to find another way to teach it, because the goal is for our students to master the content. And I want so much for future educators as well as current ones to know they are just as much as our client as Apple and AT&T and other places are, right? We have to cater to them in order to be successful.
That's really powerful. When you had talked about entitlement and educators, oftentimes in circles in education, you hear folks speaking to children and our students being entitled, right? And thinking about how we also are in those same spaces as educators. As a reminder, or a tall glass of humility we all need, especially now as we're dealing with curves and conversations around learning. My last question about your time, Eric, as an educator from our students, in addition to those practices you had for your students, you had talked about how, being one of a few persons of color as an educator in a building, right, was a lonely experience. How did you manage that? Like, how did you navigate that space?
So Kimberly, as you were saying the question, I thought of a year in Atlanta, the same year of 9/11. All of my students, it was the first day of school, 2001, I guess. And all of my students were there except for Allison, right? Allison didn't come that day, at least in the first part. And I'm in the middle of teaching, introducing myself, whatever. The kids had their name tags, and the door opens. And the mother says, "Not the end teacher," in front of the students. She was in the hall. Yes, whatever word you're thinking, that's the word she said. And I'm looking like, "Hi." And she said, "Oh no, my daughter's not having you." And she slammed the door and walked back to the office, right? Well, at this point, my kids are like, "Ooh," it was a moment, but I'm still the teacher. I have to keep my composure. Mr. Jones, we're gonna go back, right? So I shared that moment in time to share. My career has forced me to go on stage real quick, right? No matter how I really feel, and catch myself, because my students need me to be better. But how I've navigated is by always saying, as much as I think students of color need to see teachers who reflect them, white students need to see us too. Because many times white students, based on the company that they're exposed to, they don't see people of color until they go to college. And by then they've already decided who we are, right? They've already decided based on the media and movies, I should be afraid of you. You're good at singing, you're good at dancing, you're good at whatever, right? And so me as a teacher, getting to connect with them in the earliest part of their development, they'll remember a Mr. Jones who was just a regular person, right? And Mr. Jones who one day put on a hooded sweatshirt. He didn't try to rob, he wasn't, but and so the stereotypes that society tries to feed our youth, if you reach them in the earliest parts of their life with diversity, some of those stereotypes won't be real for them because they have an experience, direct experience, that contradicts whatever society tells them.
I suppose I'm wondering, Eric, I'm going to dig a little deeper. Like, but how did that experience make you feel? Like, you talk about rallying for your students and being on stage, but kind of like stepping out of it, like you leave that building, and like, does that weigh on you? And if so, how do you navigate that weight?
That was an interesting year because the principal did not take Allison out of my classroom. And so I actually saw that this past summer, by the way, after 20 years. He refused. He told the mom, either you remove Allison from my building or she's going to be in Mr. Jones's class. And I get why he did it, right? He didn't want to send a message to his majority white parents that you can pick and choose your teacher. But what he didn't do is think about what position that put me in the entire year, right? But for me, I felt like Allison needed the same love everybody else needed. And I was going to be the best teacher to her she'd ever had, make her life extremely positive. And so for me, I realized that this is work, right? And my personal feelings, I got to check out, keep in the car. I'm going into teach a second grade class and be the best teacher they ever had. And it's interesting because the other parents were so supportive. They heard what happened because all the kids went home and told their parents. And the other parents rallied around me, whatever you need, you know. And so it was actually one of the best years of teaching I ever had, despite that mom. But it was very interesting year.
Yeah, I can only imagine clearly as how you've carried it with you. And I imagine it's kind of impacted, you know, your new role in the last 3 years. And I don't know if everyone on the call quite understands what a field representative is. So could you explain to us, before I ask you about that new role and your experiences, just what is a field representative and the work that you do?
Sure. So NJEA, which most people probably know as the New Jersey Education Association, has different positions who support our educators in our schools and around the state. I'm an organizing field representative, which is different from one who bargains contracts and works with school boards, et cetera. My job is to create pathways for educators to connect in a deeper way with their association. Some of what I'm responsible for is grants with the community. We gave a lot of grants during the beginning of COVID for our first responders. We offer a lot of programming with parents virtually, of course, during this time. But for me, directly through our social and racial justice efforts with the state, we've tried to create opportunities, whether it be book clubs, whether it be virtual conversations, to connect educators. And sometimes it's even been administrators, directors of human resources, superintendents, whoever wants to tap in with having conversations about how to make our schools more inclusive. And you do that by first starting with those in power, which are educators and higher administration.
And through this role, you've been able to create a subset of NJEA and our members called the Members of Color Network, correct?
Correct.
Could you tell us a little bit about that? And then I know we have a question in the chat that I want to bring up, but I really want to talk about members of color and then situate that question there.
I have a little video too.
Perfect.
Actually, could we go to the video first?
Surely.
Tag.
Why I popped in here. Hold on.
Thank you for allowing me to share.
Oh, hold on. Hold on. Start over. Ah.
Members of Color is an inclusive group where we are trying our best to provide space, comfort, and community to educators of color, and also to our allies who believe that a stronger union includes all of us. We began our Members of Color journey in 2019, long before COVID, by outreaching to our members in various counties via text, inviting them to a first ever Members of Color discussion from September of 2019 through March of 2020 prior to COVID in Cumberland County, Burlington County, Mercer, Essex, Union. During those meetings, we asked 3 basic questions. Do you feel connected to your union? How can we greater engage you? And what are you willing to do to become more active? Those conversations led to a small community growing, where today we are over 3,000 members strong statewide of educators, advocates who are interested in being a part of an inclusive NJEA. over the last year, during our virtual year together, we did a lot of virtual conversations, book clubs, to try to build community, how to become better, how to become stronger, and how to begin to build a collaborative environment together. One of the goals of members of color is to ensure that no educator, no union member will ever feel like they are the only one in a room. For many years, I, as a teacher, would come to events and would look around often to see, was there anyone who looked like me? And many times, unfortunately, the answer was no. With members of color, our goal is to ensure that all of us who are in our workplaces around the state are also at union events, learning how to become a stronger union and learning how to see everyone and hear everyone. That's one of the goals of MOC as well. We welcome everyone to join us. If you'd like more information on us, please reach out via email to moc@njea.org. We'd love to have you join our social events as well as our enrichment events. The more we are, the stronger we are, the better we are as a union. Thank you for allowing me to share.
Eric, so can you tell us a little bit about what the members of color do and a little bit about those efforts and conversations you have with the members of color?
So members of color is really to provide a connectedness to our union. We have, New Jersey is an interesting state because I like to say everyone is here, but we have New York City in northern New Jersey, and we have semblance of Alabama and Georgia and Mississippi at the bottom of our state. In terms of, we go from urban, very crowded, right, living on top of each other almost in some parts of North Jersey, to very rural and lots of spacious land in our southern part. And so you have educators of color, particularly, who may be in the majority in some districts, and you have educators of color that may be the only one in the building, or worse, only one in the district in other parts. So the MOC is a way to connect, no matter where you work, no matter the feeling you have a family in your building or the feeling you have of isolation. MOC provides a space that, as long as you are a member, an active member of NJEA, you can connect with a network that then provides connection opportunities, social empowerment, engagement, educational. And it's really proven to be, I find, very affirming is the word I would use, very affirming for those who needed it. Now, of course, Kimberly, this was started before 2020. So imagine.
I was about to ask.
I did not see a crystal ball. I did not know what was coming. Right? We started this in 2019, but 2020 provided a whole different level of connectedness for sure.
And so how did that, so, you know, MOC starts, right? You have this network, you know, 2020 happens. And, you know, were there conversations among members about how members would talk about race in your classrooms, or did members feel like that they were having more discussions about race with their students than their white counterparts? Did that dialogue come up, or were those conversations happening?
We used to have virtual happy hours. The first Wednesday of the month, we would get together. Of course, everyone was still virtual back then. We get together and talk about whatever the topic of the month was. I remember we had one month a topic called healing. And members got on the call and people were crying. No words, it was just tears. Tears from another one of us was shot, another one of us was killed. Tears from, I want so bad for my district to put out a statement about George Floyd and they've done nothing. Tears from, I want my supervisor to understand why I'm angry and she doesn't get it. No matter what the reason is, they felt coming into that space, they didn't need to say it all because someone else would hear them and understand them. And it was affirming. We had one discussion I'll share, the death of Breonna Taylor and its impact on with women of color. And we had over 100 women on that call who spoke about what it was like to be stopped by the police, what it's like to be in fear when you're driving, what it's like to work in a school where you're in the minority or whatever the issue was. And so I feel like our conversations, I can tell you, our conversations are a lot less about instructional practices and more about, I want to be seen, I want to be heard, I want to be affirmed. And I found the network to provide a home for me to do that.
Did you feel as an educator that conversations about race happened more so than in your white counterparts' classrooms?
Yes, yes. So in 2020, a white colleague and I started a series called Race and Privilege. And it was a virtual conversation that we started in June of 2020. We ended up hosting hosted it 8 more times. And I wanted Desiree to help me host it because no one wants to hear a Black man talk about race, right? Of course, you're gonna, like, I know where I stand. When I speak on race, I speak from my lens. And to have a thorough conversation, I wanted someone who doesn't look like me, who doesn't have my experience, who grew up in South Jersey, who, when the police pulled her over, she never worried about getting arrested, right? That never crossed her mind. And so Desiree and I being able to talk and share provided a space for the members who connected with my feeling and the members who connected with Desiree's feeling, right? Both of us to share and to grow. And it was a journey that was powerful because members felt comfortable to share their own experiences, right? And I think to talk about race in a school is left up to what your district allows you to. You may have policies, you may have rules that say you can't do this, you can't do that. But first you got to talk about it as a person. You have to own your reality, your privilege, your frustrations, whatever it is, as an individual educator. And that was the work we were trying to do during our MOC discussions.
Yeah, I really grapple with what you just said about like what you can and cannot say as part of your district, right? And race being part of that conversation, right? Like really talking about who we are and how we identify and our intersections of such. You know, every teacher should have the freedom and security and safety, that space to do that. Like that is for all of the future educators on this call, it's something to think about when we think about, you know, the world we could be. You know? Yes. And so in the world that we could be, you know, Eric, and we can both do this, you know, what would you say to white future educators on the call? And what would you say to future educators of color on the call about having conversations around race? And I'll answer this question too. I can pretend to be Desiree for a hot minute.
I feel like we are in a world now where the truth is subjected to how do I feel about it, right? And I feel like for future educators, for starters, when the district is interviewing you about taking a position there, you equally should be interviewing them. Mm-hmm. Because it's my creativity, it's my passion, it's my purpose, it's my acceptance of truth gonna be embraced in this district. Because not every district is the same. And there are some districts where we want to cater to a small demographic of our population. And there are some districts we want our teachers to be open and be able to perform the best they can with all the resources. So that'll be the first recommendation I'd give to early career and newer educators. But as it relates to race, a lot of times our parent communities aren't always comfortable. And you put yourself in a lot of harm's way to be having conversations with students. Mm-hmm. If parents aren't ready to have those conversations. And so through NJEA, we have grants that are available. And part of the benefit of membership is being able to put in for a grant and saying, look, I want to have a community conversation. I want to talk about this topic or that topic. So in addition to whatever you're teaching in your classroom, you could be offering something very similar to the parents, right? Because that's where you make the biggest gain, is when you're bringing the family in, not just isolating the students you have right in front of you. So that would just be my recommendation.
Yeah. This is fun. I was just thinking, like, as a white educator, like as a white female, as a white Jewish female, as a cisgender, like if I go through all of my iterations of myself, I think about how important it is for me to talk about identity. I do teach English language arts, so that does provide context and space to have those conversations. But to approach conversations not from a place of fear, but from a place of knowing and curiosity and really thinking about like what you can discover. And you're doing that with your students. You are not alone in those moments, just despite how sometimes it might feel. And so I just think that work is happening with, and lean into that. I think a lot of there in this environment, sometimes, Eric, people can approach the classroom from a place of fear. And I think approaching it from a place of hope could really shift those conversations. And so I suppose, I mean, I think about the work that you're doing now, right? In an ideal world, Eric, as you're building these connections and members of color, like what does diversity, equity, and inclusion in schools look like?
Loaded question.
Oh, I know.
So I'm going to say what it doesn't look like first. What it doesn't look like is hiring a supervisor of diversity, and then and that person being a person of color, and then you're saying all things diversity go through you, right? That's not what it looks like, because there's a difference between diversity and inclusion. If you hire me because I'm a person of color, but then you don't want my experience, you don't want my voice, you don't want my assessment on the reading materials, you don't want anything that I bring. Yes, you have a person of diverse outside, but the culture is still predominantly white. Diversity means we see all of our employees, we see all of our students, and we want what we offer to reflect their needs, which may include changing some of the context on our library books, changing some of the field trips that we send our students to, changing some of the meals we offer at staff meetings to make sure that everybody feels represented. But often, Kimberly, that requires people to be uncomfortable, because you want me to stop serving the same food we've always served because I like that food, right? But what about the other staff members that you've hired? They don't ever get a chance to see themselves reflected. And so for me in schools, only talking about Dr. King is problematic, right? Only speaking on Latinos in September is problematic, right? Inclusion should be, we're speaking about the broad scope of our history all year long. Don't just say the Hispanics for September, the Blacks for February, the women for March, but all the rest of the year we talk about everything else, right? Inclusion should be ongoing.
Yeah. I think I was just thinking about a choice I made for my Greek drama curriculum. I teach the classics, and and I'm going to try to make this short, but there is Oedipus the King, Oedipus at Colonus, and Antigone. It's a trilogy. And instead of teaching Oedipus at Colonus, I taught Gospel at Colonus, which is a gospel adaptation. And I didn't even teach Oedipus at Colonus. And I only have one student of color in that class. And as her peers were responding to Gospel at Colonus, and they were so tuned in, like loved Gospel at Colonus, and seeing them participate, like call and response with the screen, and watching her peers in this moment. And I'm just sitting back thinking about those choices and like what inclusion looks like without isolating it and saying it's different. Like it just became part of the curriculum. That's what we're studying. And in reflection, they had one word on reflection, and she said familiar. Like wow. Gospel at Colonus felt familiar. And that to me was this moment of like, that's powerful. Like right. That you can make a text 2,500 years old, its adaptation, be part of your curriculum. Like those are choices where diversity, equity, inclusion looks like in the everyday, right? You have the administrative, roles you're talking about, but in the everyday, there's those small choices from your second grade classroom to your fifth grade classroom to choosing a text which has the same exact values, right, being communicated. And it's exciting. It's so exciting, right?
I love that story because you decided to be intentional. And I always say intentionally inclusive is the way we change the paradigm, right? I could talk about this. I could read this text because I've been reading this text for the same 10 years and teaching this text. But this year I want to do something different. I'm going to be intentional in providing a different opportunity for my students. And that to me goes the longest way with our students and for us and our development as educators as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that idea of intentionality, and even members of color, right? That there's an intentional design around creating that community. What's your goal for MOC for the next 5 to 10 years?
So I used to feel very often when I walked into our union spaces that I was going to be alone. There were some events that I was scheduled to be. For example, I'll tell you, even in 2016, I was packed and ready to go to the convention. And when it was true that Trump won, I didn't go. I said, I cannot go. I cannot go with my anger and frustration and walk into a space where I may be the only person of color. I can't do it. I literally didn't go, right, based on my own bias and fear of what may be. And so at MOC, the goal is to provide a space where no one of color ever has to wonder, will I be the lone person in any space ever again? Because worst case scenario, you bring somebody with you. That way you know you're not going to be alone. And so trying to encourage our educators, the NJEA is just as much for you as anyone else, but pull up a chair at the table, knock on the door, no longer feel as if it doesn't belong to me. You're a member, there are no member-in-laws, I like to say. Everyone's a part, jump in and bring a friend with you. And so we've seen quite a bit of improvement in participation, and we're hoping that that continues.
Is there a recruitment goal for future educators, like using the members of color to inspire future educators or reach out? Is that something maybe in the fold?
In the future, I would love that. And for me, I would love to see us go into schools and high schools, and let's talk about why do you love Mr. Jones so much, but you don't want to be Mr. Jones? Mr. Jones ain't gonna be in this school forever. As much as you love the difference he made in your life, why would you want to be him and replace Mr. Jones when he retires, right? And those are conversations that I would love to help have with students. I never went into education because I thought I was going to make a lot of money. I went because I thought I was going to make a difference in my community. And the streets, as I like to say, the outside doesn't necessarily reinforce education. They look at our profession as, oh, you can do more than that. You can be more than that. It takes us educators to turn around and recruit others because we know the benefits of this profession in a way that the outside world never will or don't understand.
Absolutely. I mean, it comes back to the beginning of this conversation about, coming across that research and understanding your place in the world, like what you had to do, right, to make that change and make that difference.
Absolutely.
Well, I really think, as I'm looking through my questions, I hope I've answered all of them for all of our students on the call. Another question I just looked down was, I have two more that I want to make sure I cover. Your personal goals, Eric. You were in the classroom for 19 years, as you said. You've been in this role for 3 years. Personal and professional goals, as you see, however long your career in education to continue.
So I'll share, I'm actually honored, Kimberly, because my sister is on the call. I share with her. My sister is actually an educator her name is Erica Brunson. She's on. She's an educator out of Illinois. And it's interesting because my goal is to make sure that every educator has a connection. Unfortunately, our profession can be very lonely. We're in rooms often by ourselves with just us and our students. You're in the room right now, exactly, right? And if you don't have a connectedness, right, with your peers, and the work is challenging because teaching is a challenging career. Let's be real, it's lots of paperwork and it's challenging. Often people leave after, there you go, see?
I have lots of show and tell.
After a few years, people get burnt out and then they find other ways to make money, right? Maybe this isn't for me. And often that happens with people of color. We have to fix that, right? We have to provide community because our students aren't going to succeed if they don't have many more of us who are not just teaching the quote traditional way, but innovative thinkers, progressives, people who really want to see change in our profession. And so I would love through members of color to just provide opportunities for non-traditional educators to come in, to connect. Love to see more men in the profession, right? And districts look at more innovative opportunities to educate students. Everyone isn't going to college. Everyone doesn't want to go to college. I don't think anybody knows if Beyonce went to college or not at all, right? But she's certainly not at a short for any money, right? So there's ways to make money and make a great career, and it's not always the academic world. We just have to provide a much broader opportunity for students, and I'd love to see that happen in the future.
How can, we think about our teachers of color, how can white educators be part of that, solution of keeping their colleagues in schools? Like you were saying that Black educators, educators of color find themselves leaving earlier at faster rates. Like, is there a role or a space?
Yes. So I would say this. Let's say, Kimberly, you and I were working in the same building.
That'd be very fun.
Yes, absolutely. You're here and I'm next door to you. It may be helpful if you and I ever had a conversation about, hey, what is it like for you to work here? Because even though we work in the same district, in the same building, on the same hallway, your experience may be completely different from mine. You may be able to go into the staff lounge and talk about whatever happened on the weekend, et cetera, blah, blah, blah. When I'm in the staff lounge, I may be there alone. I'm a male, I'm Black, I may be the only one, right? And so my sense of frustration about the work, in addition to a sense of loneliness because no one really connects with me on that personal level, could make me question whether or not this is really for me. And so I think talking with your peers about what it's like to be here. What is it like to be a student at the TCNJ or to work in this district or be on this, whatever it is, and talk with each other often provides an opportunity of connectedness. Sorry, I live in New York City, so that's the noise. Often provides a sense of connectedness that if you don't have those conversations, you'll never really know.
Eric, I suppose final piece of advice before Jeannie comes back on with our final subset of questions. Well, I suppose I have two questions, but advice for future educators of color. What should they know after leaving this call?
Find a connection at every level that you go. I'll never forget Miss Harvey, who I met my senior year of college that fall. I was 21 years old. Miss Harvey had been teaching for 40 years. And I was so caught up on teaching these kids multiplication facts. And she said, listen, let me tell you something. If you don't connect with these kids on a personal level, they don't care what you're trying to teach them, they ain't gonna learn it. And I'm like, oh, okay. And it taught me, find out what their favorite color is. Find out who they wanted to watch. Like, find out who your kids are as a person. And then whenever you teach them, they'll want to learn it because they want to please and make sure that you're happy. And that was a lesson I never, ever forgot, right? No one in college taught me that. They gave me instructional strategies and pedagogies. Ms. Harvey taught me, learn who your kids are as people, as children. And so I would say having a mentor, you learn those valuable nuggets that you may not get in a textbook. But those nuggets will help you far more sometimes than what you learn in any education course.
Eric, and I think that advice is not only for future educators, but also current educators and veteran educators, is that we are constantly reconnecting. And because I think it's a very human profession and you have to keep rehumanizing this work. Otherwise, you do feel like you're just in the multiplication tables and the Linkit test and X, Y, or Z. And it's really easy sometimes to forget that you need to prioritize the humanity of this work.
Absolutely.
Oh, Eric, it was such a joy speaking with you and walking through this Representation Matters dialogue. And I just want to know, before I pass it to Jeannie, what does Representation Matters mean to you? Like, that's what we're talking about today. Like, what does Representation Matters actually mean?
Everyone deserves the right to be seen, to be heard, whether it's through gender or sexual identity or race or ethnicity or physical challenges one may have. Every student deserves to be recognized. And often, as I shared before, it's that privilege of the educator. Well, I taught it. Well, this is my room. Well, this is me. No. The students are our clients, and making sure that every student has the opportunity to be represented by who's in front of them, right? If your entire building are all women, that's not representing everybody there. If they're all men, if they're all Black, if they're all white, our students need to see the world in their schools. And representation matters in order to be able to support that.
Yes. Thank you, Eric. I'm going to pass you back to Jeannie, who will have a much lighter load for the questions. But I have really enjoyed this conversation, and I know I will take a lot away with me as I move forward in my school year. Good luck to you.
Kimberly. Thank you.
Yes. All right. To the doctor.
Thank you. So this, the whole conversation leads me back to the old adage, you teach kids first and you teach curriculum second, right? And so even as someone who teaches college students today in education, that was something that I impressed upon my students before they walked out that door. So it is starting to trickle down. But something else I wanted to bring up in this conversation, since we're talking research and experience and that sort of thing, I've been trying to figure out ways that we can recruit future educators to the profession. And so a piece of research that I ran across from 2019 said that there are a few reasons why people decide to become educators. Number one is if they can see themselves in the role, right? So if they have the confidence to be able to stand up, to think that they can stand in front of a class of students and teach. So giving students experiences standing up and teaching, whether it's teaching in small groups, teaching one-on-one, tutoring, all fantastic. The second biggest factor in deciding whether kids enter the profession is if they have a family member or a close person close to them tell them that they would make a great educator. Right? So I can't express enough how important it is that for teachers out there today, when you see students who have those qualities, that je ne sais quoi, that thing, that it factor, whether it is because they work well with other students, they're coaching, they mentor, they may not even be thinking about teaching, but to tell those kids, to tap them on the shoulder and go, you know what, you would make a great teacher someday, and here is why. Not just to tell them that they would do well, but why they would do well. Those things about them that would really connect with students on a different level in the future. So Eric, I love the idea of getting out into schools and talking. So we're going to get something together and put together a little, take the show on the road kind of thing, because I'm feeling this now. So this works for me. But in the meantime, I'm very happy that we've had everyone here today, and thank you for such a rich conversation. I think it was one that was well overdue and well worth having. And I find, at least in my experience, white people don't tend to talk about race as much because it isn't something that is central to their lives. It's kind of like the given. It's the that everything is supposed to be the way that they think it is. And so I find that when I'm in spaces with my Black friends and colleagues, it becomes much more of the discussion. So it's interesting to bring that into the forefront here and talk about the lived experiences of people, because not everyone is the same, and it's important to have everyone understand what we can do to support each other, to be allies, and to help when thinking about the next generation of teachers. So our last little bit, so these rapid fire questions are a little odd, but we like to make sure that we ask every single participant who comes on our show the same set of questions to kind of set that standard for everyone. So these are questions that I want you to think too hard about. You just kind of rapid fire answer them, and we'll go. Okay, you ready?
All right.
Okay. What's your favorite word?
No.
What's your least favorite word?
Yes.
Teachers have to learn how to say no every once in a while.
All right. I don't know how to do it well. It is my favorite. Right.
Okay, so if you could have any superhero power, what would it be?
To know what's going to happen in advance.
Okay. What was your favorite subject when you were at school?
History.
What subject or grade level do you wish you taught?
Oh, I would probably say high school.
Okay. What grade or subject
The
level?
subject would probably be history. I like talking about history.
Okay. And on the flip side of that, what grade or subject level or subject or grade level would you not want to teach?
The sciences.
Okay.
Chemistry, physics, no, none of it.
Okay. What sound or noise do you love?
I didn't hear that question.
What sound or noise do you love?
Oh, I love when the ice cream truck's coming down. I love that. I love that. That's always everything I'm a kid again. I love that noise.
What sound or noise do you hate?
Ding! When you get a new email, that means you have work to do.
If someone were to play you in a movie version of your life, who would you want it to be?
Somewhere to play me. Let's go with Will Smith.
Okay. What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
I would love to be the next Don Lemon.
Okay. And if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Meet your mom.
Oh. And thank you, Eric. You have been a wonderful guest for today. Thank you to all of our participants, our audience. Remember, this will be available on our website as of next week. If you have any information, reach out to cfe@tcnj.edu. And thanks for joining us today. And we will see you all in April if we don't see you in March at our conference. So thanks so much, everyone. See ya.
Bye.